So welcome to Larry's Library. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscription button there, ring the bell so you don't miss any upcoming stuff, if you like it. And if you've been here before, welcome back. And this week, I want to talk a little bit about the love of books. So when I approach these kind of things, I don't try to pretend I'm the end-all and be-all expert of the universe or anything. The thing that I am expert most about is my own opinions and my own history. Especially my own personal history. So that's why this will be a very personal thing. I'm going to talk about my love of books, and maybe it's why you love books, and maybe you have some similar reasons or different reasons, and we can discuss those in the comments below for sure, and that'll be fun. But for me, the love of books started very, very early. So why books? Well, I like the smell of books. I like the pulp paper. I like the new slick paper. I like all of it. It just smells good. I like the texture in my hands. Maybe that's why I've never been able to get into digital reading so much. It doesn't have that tactile feel that I don't know. I just enjoy. I don't have to have a good reason for it, right? But I like it, and it's comforting. It's something that's been with me my whole life, and offers escape when I need it, which is often. I bet it's often for you too. So that's what I'm going to talk about, kind of my personal history with books and why I love books. Not just comic books, but all books, any books. One thing that I have to mention, especially since I'm here in the library, is when we were building this house, and I won't go into too much detail about that, it's very off topic, but this is a pole barn building, a post frame building. And we essentially built a house inside of that framework that was already there. And anyway, so I got to design most of it, a lot of the things going on here, especially in this room. And I designed and I helped build all of this stuff, including the whole house really, but especially this wall, this 16-foot long built-in shelf wall. And maybe I'll show a few shots of that, but you guys have seen that before. It's always behind me in these videos. I remember, I don't think the guy knew I was there at the time. I was like in a different part of the house, but I could hear him because all the walls weren't built yet. We had the 2x4s up and the studs and everything, but no drywall yet. And we used to have this guy. We have a different guy now, but we had a guy that farmed the property. I actually live on a farm, believe it or not. And there's fields of usually soybeans or corn or something around me here. So that farmer, the guy we used before they would come and farm this stuff, we didn't farm it ourselves. He was in here, and my father-in-law, who lives on the property, it's his property, essentially. I mean, long story. But anyway, he had the farmer guy we used in here, and he was giving him kind of a tour and showing him the layout. And I remember distinctly, he had him in here, and he showed him this wall. We had completed the built-in shelves here. And my father-in-law was like, yeah, it's really something, and it's pretty impressive. It should hold several hundred books, maybe thousands. I don't know, it's a lot. And the guy was not impressed at all. He looked at it and goes, yeah, but why would anybody want to do that? That's what he said. Why would anybody want that? And he was really confused, and he just sort of walked away after that. And yeah, and that struck me, and it stayed with me for forever. I mean, it's been a few years ago, several years ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and man, that stayed with me, because I thought, because I've known a few people like this, throughout life, where they don't have that love of books, they don't have a love of reading, and I feel sorry for them, because I know they're missing out on whole worlds that they will never see, and also sources of information that they will never have, because they don't want to in some cases, or maybe they can't. Maybe some of them can't read, which is really sad to think that, that there's adults walking around now in the U.S. and elsewhere that can't read. And in the case of like this guy, I don't know if he can read or not, but he didn't seem to care. He couldn't even understand why someone would want all this. And that is really sad to me. See, I've never forgot that one. So I've got a lot of great memories of my childhood connected with books. So some are all of them are pretty good. Some of them are just weird. Some of them are funny. And I'm going to relate a few of them. One early memory I have, my late sister, Kim. We called her Kimmy. She didn't let anyone outside the family call her that, but anyway. She was about 5 years older than me. And I remember I've always had a fascination with books and words specifically, to the point where I would actually just read the dictionary for fun. I would just browse through there and look up words and read them and try to understand them. And it's just something I did, you know. I would do it. A lot of times I would drag the dictionary in front of the TV, and I'd lay down in front of the TV on my stomach, and I'd have the big dictionary there, and I'm just sifting through, you know, as I was kind of half watching TV and half perusing this dictionary and reading it. And one of my favorites was this giant dictionary I got somewhere, probably a yard sale, I don't know. But it was, you know, it was like that thick. And I have you probably see it in the shop maybe down there. I got one I found just a few years ago. I think it might have been in an auction sale that my father-in-law was involved with. And so we got a big box of books, and that giant thing was in there. I'll show some B-roll of it here if I can. If I can open it without it falling apart. It's very, very old. But that's not the exact book from this story, but it's similar. I think the one when I was a little kid was not quite that thick, but it was similarly thick as that one. A little bit smaller. Anyway, and I'd have that book opened up, and my sister would always tease me, you know. And so I was probably, you know, 8 years old maybe. So she was about 5 years older than me. So she was a young, early teenager, you know. And she would go, "Here comes Larry and his big dictionary." And she'd always say it that way. She'd say, "Here comes Larry and his big dictionary." And that just perplexed me to no end. I was like, well, why are you saying it that way? Stop saying it like that. Well, why are you doing that? And she'd just do it again, and she'd just laugh hysterically. And it was years before I figured out why the hell she was saying it like that, you know. So, another early memory is, you know, and partly fueled my love of books, is just sort of the rebellion aspect of it. Like when someone bans a book for whatever reason, or I hear about it, that book was banned, then I question, well, why was it banned, and where can I get a copy of it? Because I don't like it when people try to tell me what to do, especially when it comes to reading. And so that you know, a banned book list is probably a read list for me, you know, or at least it used to be, you know, when I was younger. And one thing that I read about somewhere, this is way before the internet, but I read somewhere when I was very young, something about Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus, how just horribly graphic it was, and violent, bloody even. And I thought, man, I want to read that. So I went to the public library, and I found some kind of copy of it, or some translation. I don't know what the hell it was, but somehow or another I read Titus Andronicus, and I think it was 3rd or 4th grade. Yeah, it was bloody and it was violent. I don't remember much about it now. That was a lot of years ago, but yeah, that was one of the early reads I had, because someone said I shouldn't read it. I went and read that. So another thing I remember from my childhood in books is going to yard sales, rummage sales, garage sales, whatever you want to call them, depending on where you're at, I guess, what that is called. And I don't know how common it is now, or probably not so common now with the internet. People can buy and sell, you know, that way. But I mean, they're still out there, of course. But back in, I guess, early 80s, late 70s, my mom would, every Saturday, damn near every Saturday, she would go to yard sales. And sometimes she'd drag me with her, sometimes not. And it would be, she would go through the newspaper and write down all the addresses and the times and stuff. And so she'd have it mapped out all over the city. And we would hit all of those yard sales, you know. And so we'd start like 8 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes earlier. And she'd hit 30, 40, 50 yard sales before the end of the day, you know, before the end of the yard sale day, you know. So usually, like, you know, much after noon, and as she put it, they would have dried up and been picked through by then, you know. And so naturally, I would try to get books and comic books. And one of the memories I have is laying in the back seat of the car, and it was some big, huge American car. Not a station wagon usually, but a big-ass car. So a big, wide bench seat in the back. And I would be laying back there with my comic books that I've managed to obtain. And I remember just reading those comic books, and I felt so safe. And, of course, no seatbelt. I'm laying down in the back of a car, you know. I don't have a seatbelt on. But I felt safe, you know. And part of that, I think, was just because I had my books, you know. I'm lost in the world of these books. I'm not even thinking about what's going on, you know. she could be in hellacious traffic and I wouldn't know it. I'm reading my books. I'm happy, you know. And another thing I remember from school is, and this was early on. I don't know. It was a grade school for sure. And we would have like it wasn't a free period, but it would be like during gym class, which I hated that. That was a horror show. I was a picked on little kid. I'm really short, didn't look my age, looked much younger than I was. So I was always the target of bullying, and it was horrible. I remember school mostly as hell. But sometimes during phys ed, gym class, whatever you want to call it, they would have a free period because they can't do whatever activity they originally planned. So they would be like, you guys can just play what you want. You can play basketball or whatever. And of course, that was not anything that interested me. So I would escape from that as much as I could. And sometimes I would actually just take off and just get out of there, you know. And usually I would go unnoticed. But I had to go somewhere. I just wanted to read my books, you know. And I remember there was we used to, instead of hall monitors, we had a teacher that would sit in the hallway in one of those chairs with the desk attached, you know, a little wing right here. And she would sit there, you know, monitoring, and I guess people would have to have a hall pass to walk around. Well, during this free period, at least at this particular school, and I went to a lot of schools, parents moved a lot, so that didn't help my childhood either, being the new kid all the time. But anyway, so the teacher would sit there at this desk, you know, and monitor the hallway. Like all monitor, but it'd be a teacher. Anyway, I remember I'm looking for a place to just be with my books, you know, to just be alone with my books, at least for that 45 minutes or however long I had before the next class, you know. So I was wandering around, and the library was locked for some reason, so I couldn't go in there, which would be my first refuge, you know, that I would pick. And that was a no-go. But that desk was there, that chair and desk, wing combo, whatever they called those, was sitting there, and the teacher wasn't in. Nobody was around. I'm like, well, hell, let's use that. So I just sat down there and got my book out, started reading right there, and, you know, wait for the bell to ring, you know, so I knew it was the next period. And I'm just reading my book, and, you know, a few minutes into that, this teacher comes down the hallway, and she says, excuse me, sir. You know, trying to be cute, I guess, you know, talking to a little kid. I'm like, yes. And she's like, though you look very teacherly sitting there, you can't sit there, and you'll have to go to class. And I'm like, well, it's a free period, you know, a gym or whatever. And she's like, well, you can't sit there, though, because though you look very teacherly, you're not a teacher. So I don't know why, but that story stuck with me forever, the way that woman said, you look very teacherly. And, of course, in grade school, I was one of those kids that, and into high school, too, that I was just constantly reading. But I didn't do that well as far as grades because I wasn't reading the textbooks. I would have my book. It's a cliche, you know, now, but it was true. That's what I'd have my book inside the textbook. I'm reading Conan, you know. And I still have all my old Conan paperbacks. I'll try to run some B-roll here of all them. But I read all the original Robert E. Howard paperbacks in school, in, I guess, late grade school, early high school. I read all them in school. Inside of a textbook. That's, you know. But yeah, reading for me has been a lifelong thing, and it'll continue to be, and I just love it. I'm always reading several books at once now. I've got usually an omnibus that I'm reading at night before I go to bed, and I'm usually reading a prose book I take to work with me. And when I say to work, I can't read at work, but me and my wife we work at the same place, but our shifts are 30 minutes off from each other. So I'll bring a prose book in the car, and so I have to wait for her 30 minutes after. So I've got, you know, by the time I get out there and get set up, I've got 20 minutes of uninterrupted reading in the car. So, I've had people say, oh, you got to wait a half hour before you go home every day? You know, like it's a drag. I'm like, yeah, but I don't mind it at all. I got my book. I got a book waiting for me out there, man. I'm okay with it. Trust me. You know, and I can shut the world out and escape from all of that nonsense that I've dealt with all day. And boy, it's a horror show sometimes too. You know, it's not as bad as school, but it's rough, especially the older I get. 10-hour shifts on concrete standing is rough. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about books and the love of books and why I love them. And that's just some of my history with books and how much I love them, and I, I continue to now, and I feel sorry for the people that don't understand why you would want all this, and I feel even more sorry for the people that can't read. So, why do you love books? Why do you continue to love books, and what are your book habits? Let's talk about them in the comments below, and I'll see you next week.